right, guys. Hey, it's Jonathan Edwards here. Welcome to another video or an audio, depending on where you are. But listen, as a disclaimer, as always, I work with aspiring athletes and their families. These are families who've got big athletic dreams and they really go for it. My advice is geared towards them. So with that in mind, some of that advice may not rub you the right way if you are not as kind of into it or committed. If you aren't willing to take 100% responsibility for your athletic experience, if you're going to blame coaches, blame the weather, blame something other than yourself, it probably isn't the advice for you. So if you're going to hang out, that's fine. Leave appropriate comments where necessary. But again, just a little disclaimer, this advice isn't for everybody. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Let's get started. So the first topic I want to talk about is about Sha'Carri Richardson, and you might have seen this week. Now, I don't care if you're not a track athlete. If it doesn't matter if you're a lacrosse player, a hockey player, a luge athlete, a bobsled athlete, a figure skater, a gymnast, whatever. The story about Sha'Carri Richardson is pretty interesting. And so, one of the bits of advice I give to all my athletes is that you should really not be, when you watch a sporting event, you should really watch it without the sound. Don't be listening to the announcers. You should just be listening maybe to the music or nothing at all, because a lot of what is filtered through the media gives a false representation of what's really happening to the athletes on the field of play. And for my athletes, I want you to understand that that basically your experience can be very different than what is happening right there. And what happens, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later when we talk about the British tennis athlete. But this idea that when you listen to a sports announcer, you're seeing the event through their filter, and that doesn't have to be your filter, right? So that's really important to understand is that how you're filtering things is really important. Okay. So when you see an athlete who you may, there's a saying like, don't meet your heroes, because sometimes when you hear about the sporting event through their eyes, then it affects how you feel. And that's not necessarily true. It doesn't necessarily have to affect you like that. Okay. So Sha'Carri Richardson, if you don't know what the story is, U.S. Olympic trials, track and field trials happened like last week up in Oregon. It's always a massive deal before the Tokyo Olympics are just a few weeks away. And USA track and field runs their Olympic trials like right before the Olympics. So it's a big buildup and it's really cool stuff. And Sha'Carri Richardson is one of the top female athletes in the world. She's a gold medal hopeful, and I'll just put up an image there. But it was crazy. So this year she's won like pretty much everything. She finished second to a British athlete, Emma Smith. But now the name is totally affecting me now. But anyway, so Sha'Carri is like basically the best in the world. And what's a big deal about it is that she's also a favorite in the 100-meter, which hasn't happened in the U.S. As a U.S. woman in about 10 years. I think that's the deal. So a lot of buildup in the United States about this, about Sha'Carri Richardson. And then so crazy thing happens. Like basically she gets she has an interview with a reporter, and the reporter tells her that her biological mother has died. What? Crazy, right? Like that's just weird. And so what ends up happening is that Sha'Carri goes out because of the trauma, and she talked about how shocking it was. I think she said it was nerve shocking or shock nerving, one of the two. But the idea was that she went off and she smoked pot to deal with the pain, right? To deal with the pain and the emotional pain of having to deal with that. Now, listen, I'm going to talk a little bit again. I just want to let everybody know, my advice is for like athletes who are super serious about the results and they want to basically take 100% responsibility for everything that they do and the results that they get, because that's really the most powerful position you can be in. And successful people will tell you that no matter how bad things are in their life, that they have the ability to take action, and from that action, then they are going to they're going to get a result, and then that result is purely theirs. Now, the interesting thing about this is that is that Sha'Carri basically said that she knew what she was doing when she smoked pot and the risk that takes. And from an Olympic athlete standpoint, smoking weed is probably like the worst drug you could possibly take because it stays in your system for a really long time. And so, and testing, like back when I was an Olympian a long time ago, basically pot stayed in your system for like 30 days. So if you smoke pot today and in 29 days from now you get drug tested, the remnants of basically of cannabis is stuck in your system and they'll find it in your urine. Okay. Now testing now is much more advanced. I'm sure it's even longer than that. Okay. So it's really important to kind of keep that in mind. So, so, so the fastest US woman in a decade, like fails drug test. Now, what's really interesting about this is that the world, like the general population was like up in arms, like, oh, smoking weed is like not that big of a deal. Like you shouldn't, and oh my gosh, she lost her mother. Like that's horrific. And so what happens is everybody filters this through their own experience, right? Now I'll tell you like the harshest approach that I can possibly give you right now, and we'll build from there. Every day, people lose their biological mother. Like every day, some people, somebody's going to lose their biological, they're going to die, right? And you're going to have to deal with that. Now, in this case, I get it. There's a reason why this story is all over like the tabloids, is because it's kind of weird, right? And so she talks about like her the relationship that she has with her mother. She was basically raised by her grandparents, and her grandmother and her aunt raised her. Her biological mother was like not really in the picture. But that's neither here nor there. Like, I don't really, I'm not really interested in that part of the story. It sucks. I appreciate it, but the message that I want to bring across today is that as an athlete, okay, there are going to be 9 women on the starting line at the Tokyo Olympics. Now, not all of them lost their biological mother this week. I get it. But the bottom line is that there's going to be 9 athletes that are going to be on that starting line. And one of those athletes is going to be the athlete that she lost to earlier this year at the Grand Prix in Gateshead in the Diamond League. But the point is that, and I said this a couple weeks ago when I was talking about Naomi Osaka and her situation there. Sport doesn't care about what you're dealing with. Like there's no asterisk, there's no there's just a score. There's just in the 100-meter dash, there is just there's just a number. It's like, this Olympic champion ran 10:8 and there it is. There's no asterisk that gives points or attacks for what that athlete had to deal with. And the conversation now, like today, is very much about athlete feelings and their emotional, their mental health and their well-being. And I get it, but that's always been there. And the thing is that while Sha'Carri Richardson had to deal with this, with the loss of her biological mother, regardless of the situation around that, whether she was close to her mom or not, like that's irrelevant. What happened here, though, is that something happened, some sort of life event happened that derailed this athlete in such a way that she then looked to things outside of herself to help cope with that. Right? That's the mechanics here, right? The event plus the response equals her outcome. So E plus R equals O. So the event gets kind of sideswiped by some random reporter saying, "Hey, your biological mom died," and you totally know that reporter was just like sitting on that story to spring it on her and hoping that nobody else would. But my question is like, well, where was her team? And the team around an athlete isn't just like the team. It's like it's going to be her grandmother, it's going to be her aunt, it's going to be her agent, it's going to be her mental performance coach if she doesn't have one. And with the U.S. Olympic Training Center, there's tons of resources for athletes that they can have. And so the agent, her chiropractor, her acupuncturist, like her coach, her head coach, like these are all people that athletes set up around them to be their support team. And I call this your athlete mastermind, right? You really need to have like that third party that can help you like go, okay, wait a second. Right. So this, and Olympians in like the 100-meter dash, the 100-meter dash for both the men and the women is like the premier sporting event globally, not just at the Olympics, but in the Diamond League every event they have. So if you look at this, like this is like the Diamond League, worldathletics.org. You can see every athlete's ranking, see where they're what they're doing, what their personal bests are, how their times have changed over the years, and over the seasons. Like you see her times improve in different events and her progressions. This is really kind of cool, right? You can see like basically 6 years ago she ran a 12.9. And then in Texas, and then this year she's run a 10.7. Okay, so this is a big deal, right? And so for an athlete to be sideswiped by any of this information always surprises me a little bit. I'm kind of like, what? All right, but the truth is that the event, biological mother passing away, her response to that event, regardless of how she gets the information, her response to that event equals her outcome. And what's happened here is that her outcome supposedly like caused her to go smoke some weed to deal with it, and then that resulted in a drug test. Okay, as tragic as that is, and as the general sports fan will be like, that's horrible, I go like, yeah, but there's 9 other athletes who are going to be in that starting line. So for the athletes listening to me right now, while everyone is quick to blame everything else, like, oh, the U.S. Olympic Committee sucks, or for not putting her on the team anyway. And that was discussion because it was like she had like this 30-day ban, and then she could still run the relay. But the U.S. Olympic Committee left her off the team anyway because she tested positive. And that's, I think kudos to them. It sounds harsh, but it's the rules, right? And it's the rules that as Olympians, that's what we are putting ourselves in, is that we are putting ourselves in this world of to be drug tested. And a lot of people don't get that. The general population doesn't get that. They're like, oh, you should give her a pass. It was her mom. Like, oh my God. No, that's the deal. Like, when world records are certified, there's a wind aided, and actually you can see right here. So along with this result, when a sprinter races, they say like, oh, they ran a 10.7, but they had a wind aid of 1.6. And there's limitations as to what wind, how big the wind can be, or how strong the wind can be to certify a world record. So somebody may run a world record, but if it's wind aided, it doesn't count as a world record because it was wind aided. But the same thing goes with all these other things, is and reaching for, whether you're reaching for, your favorite blanket, your stuffy, weed, alcohol. There's certain things that fall within the realms of what's allowed and what's not. And unfortunately, that bit her in the butt. Now, a couple things I just wanted to kind of talk about. One is that I'm a little fishy. I feel a little fishy about this whole situation, because it doesn't totally pan out. In some ways, she smoked weed and she got pot, but really, you're like one of the top athletes in the world. What's going on. And even though she said that she knew what she was doing, one thing that this does, something to understand from an athlete's perspective, is that these track and field athletes make a lot of money from the Diamond League all season long. So the Olympics, while being Olympic champion, is a big deal. And she's only 21, right? One thing that this causes an athlete to do is miss any other drug testing. And so, there's just some speculation there, and I'm not going to get too deep in that because a lot of you that listen to me don't fully, you're not fully into that side of sport, which is great. But there's some weird things here. But what I want to understand is this, okay? One of my athletes understand is that the message here is that Sha'Carri reached for something outside of herself to deal with this. Now, it's not like as an athlete you visualize your mom passing away suddenly, or being told by some random reporter. I get that the surprise, even the relationship here is weird, but again, it's her response to this event. Now, if you understand this, that even in the most tragic situations, not everybody reaches for weed. Not everybody reaches for alcohol. Not everybody, just thinks their life is over. And if anything, the message I want to share with everybody is like, if your mom passed away, like she doesn't want you to suffer, right? She wants you to go off and do an amazing things. And this is where a really supportive message that should have gotten to Sha'Carri at this point was like, yo, you don't have to do this. Your mom doesn't want to see you like medicating with weed that's going to cause you to miss the Olympics. That's kind of dumb. All right. So, we want our athletes to understand that your ability to grieve, okay, and you've heard me talk about this before, like grieving. I believe that the key to athletic success is really about like to expedite the grief process, to go through all the phases, right? And depending on which model you look at, there's like 5 stages of grief, right? So the first one is like anger and denial. Oh my God, I can't believe my mother died. That's horrible. The second one is bargaining. Like I would do anything to get my mom back right now. All right. The third phase though is depression. And this is where a lot of people get stuck, because depression is what gets you in kind of this negative feeling. And now more than ever, our athletes are being taught like that, oh my God, you shouldn't deal with that. Like you shouldn't have to deal with that feeling. No, you're right. You shouldn't have to deal with it. But that's, as athletes, that what we do. We go out, we go compete, we have a result. The result isn't that great. And guess what? That makes us feel bad. But from that feeling, that negative feeling is what we're going to rebound from. And the next stage from depression in the grieving stages is basically turning it around. It's this feeling of like, all right, I know things are shitty right now, but they're going to get better. And it's that moment of like optimism where a person, not just an athlete, a person starts moving up. And the final stage of grief is acceptance, right? And so the faster, whatever event that happens to you, whether you lose your biological mother or anything else, right? Your response to that is what's really important. And so as you go through those grieving stages, right, when you get to that depression stage, you're not meant to stay there. Right. It's like it's the Winston Churchill quote, which is like, when you're going through hell, keep going, right? Don't just sit there. Right. And so what's unfortunate about this, what really bums me out is that Sha'Carri made the choice to search for weed, which, like I said, it's the worst thing an Olympian could pick when you're getting drug tested. It's just dumb. So there's a little bit of self-sabotage here, which is kind of interesting. But that's a whole nother conversation. But there's athletes that when you're getting close to that success, that it's a psychological trait for some people that they get really close. It's not fear of failure. There's actually fear of success. And that may be in play here slightly as well. Okay. And so as an athlete, as you get towards your goal, right, and Sha'Carri is going to go to Tokyo and possibly win Olympic gold. That's a big deal. That's like, but there's people who will self-sabotage themselves. And that's really, it's a complicated thing. But I wanted to I want to make sure we touch on that a little bit. The other thing I want to touch on here is how the general population is going like, oh, weed's no big deal. This shouldn't be testing for weed anymore. Okay. Here's the deal. So I'm an American, but I live in Canada, and in Canada, they've made weed is legal, and there's like cannabis stores, there's like Spirit Leaf, and there's Tweed, which I think is kind of a cool name. It's Tweed. We sell weed. That's their motto. So I live in a country where weed is legal, and it's crazy because like we go skiing and we hit the parking lot after skiing, and there's people like lighting up in the parking lot before they drive home. That's a little weird. Okay. But the thing I want to talk about right now is this idea of like, should weed be tested for? And the answer is yes. And some people think like, is weed performance enhancing? Well, when I was an Olympian, there was this conversation like that weed helped some sports, but not others. Like if you were an Olympic lifter, weed wasn't going to help you. But if you were like a biathlete and you wanted to regulate your heart rate, or you're a pistol shooter or an archer, it would be performance enhancing for those sports. However, one thing that I've learned, I've come to understand, is that as an athlete, we have, between now and whenever, we have, let's say we have an event coming up in a few months. What ends up happening is that we are going to train and recover and train and recover and train and recover. That's really what being an elite athlete is all about, is we are training. So train, recover, compete, recover, repeat. That's the motto, right? So the more frequently you can train and recover, and the more frequently you can kind of create that oscillation, the better you are going to, the more opportunities you have to train, the more chances we get to basically wire our nervous system on what we want to have happen. And the more frequently we can do that, the better. So a couple of the things I just want to share with people about the weed offense. So weed, like, there's THC and CBD, and cannabinoids. I won't get all technical in here. This is a fantastic article here by marijuanadoctors.com. I'll put the link in the comments. But the idea here is that I just want to read you some of the benefits, because people are going like, "Oh, Sha'Carri, we shouldn't test for it." It's not true. All right. So here's the deal with THC. Some of the effects of THC include a sense of euphoria, relaxation, pain relief, amplified senses, increased creativity, and an overall feeling of well-being. Okay, that's THC. In the CBD, or so THC in weed gives you kind of like the more like the more euphoric psychosomatic, like it's not psychosomatic, psychedelic aspects, if you get it. Not everybody gets it. All right. But the potential benefits of CBD, which is like, people have CBD oil, and that doesn't give you like the high that pot will give you, but it will give you a lot of the other benefits. So the benefits of CBD include improved mood, pain relief, decreased appetite, anti-inflammatory responses, and migraine relief. So when you look at the benefits of CBD, you can see how a lot of those effects, or those benefits, can actually help a sprinter. It's not about the performance enhancing benefits at the moment in the event. It's all the time between, when an athlete is training and recovering and training and recovering. So this is why marijuana is still tested for, and why I think it should still be tested. Now, if you're not an Olympic athlete and you want to go smoke a joint because you want to chill out for a little bit, that's cool. But again, all of the ability we have to deal with the events in our life are in here. They're right here. And so as an athlete, here's the deal. If you tap into that, if you understand what's going on, right, mentally, emotionally, physically within your body, if you understand that, you will not fall prey to reaching for things outside of you to self-soothe. And we are, like, human beings love to do that. And the general population who doesn't know half of what you know as an athlete, and they're the ones that reach for these things. This is why people go to Vegas. This is why there's cannabis retailers all over, or liquor stores. It's why we have illegal drug trades and things like that. People are always looking for things outside of themselves to deal with the feelings they have inside, right? And like I said at the beginning of this video, rather harshly, I know, but there are 9 other athletes that are going to be running at the 100 meters in Tokyo, and Sha'Carri Richardson isn't one of them. And I understand that she went through a pretty traumatic event. However, what's interesting about this is there are a lot of people, thinking about their mom right now, right? Their mom. It sounds to me, and again, this is I don't want to judge the situation, but for someone who grew up without her biological mother, wouldn't that be a little bit of a different situation than if you grew up with a really loving mom every day, and so wouldn't that be a little bit different? But again, I'm not judging that. I'm just, stating a fact there. But the point is that I want my athletes, listening to me, and if you're a parent listening to me and you self-soothe with alcohol or drugs or other sorts of addictions, food, porn, any of those things, the idea here is that you also have the ability to deal with that stuff in here. And I'm pointing to my head for those of you guys listening in on our podcast or on Instagram right now. The idea is that the event, your response, that's what you need to develop, is your response, and that'll equal your outcome. There's 9 athletes on the start line of the Olympics, and Sha'Carri's not going to be one of them. That's disappointing. We're going to miss out on this big event, and everybody, after the 100 meters are over, everybody's going to say, oh, well, but Sha'Carri should have won it. No, that's wrong, right? And Sha'Carri's been totally open about the choices she made, which I think is awesome. Like, she's totally owned it, and that's a great message to have. I'm just wondering, like, dude, why? You're like 3 weeks away from being Olympic champion, and you reach for something that she said she knew the risk she was taking. It's like, dude, that's unfortunate. So I want all of our athletes to understand that the responses to the events in your life are totally yours, and you have to take 100% responsibility for your response over all those events. And when you do, that's the key. When you do, then these opportunities open up. Right? When an elite athlete steps out, right, and goes like, I'm done, I can't deal, and everybody's like, oh, it's so hard, so much pressure. There are other athletes coming in right behind them, right? That's the reality, right? So the job isn't to wish it was easier. The job is to wish that you were better, and that's what I want to leave everybody with here right now. Okay, so listen. If this resonated with you and you want to leave me a really good comment, please do. Or if you're watching this on YouTube later, whatever, if you've watched all the way to the end, make sure in your comment you write down, I watched all the way to the end. Because if you don't, there's people that leave me like 5-second comments after I do 30 minutes of video. But the idea here is that if you want to leave a good comment, please do.